let me add a little bit more to this about actually how numbers work in the Bible. They're actually confusing, and it seems like they're not always accurate to what we would expect. But it turns out the ancient people seem to be working on a base 60 counting system. The technical term is sesagesimal. Most of us today use a base 10. You got 10 fingers, and it goes 10, 100, 1,000. Anciently, it was 60, 120, all up to 360 and beyond. And it's interesting how they would do the counting. And this kind of ties into the 120 years that Noah was preaching. You might notice your fingers, you got 3 segments on each finger. And if you use your thumb as a pointer, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It's interesting. So that's 12. Do that again. 24, 36, 48, 60. You can get to 60. You can count to 60 on just 2 hands. Very, very powerful. So you'll notice that often you'll find repetitions of numbers related to 60 or 120. For example, the fact that Noah preaches for 120 years might in part be related to the sesagesimal system, that it's 3 times 40. And in the numbering system, 40 means just a really long time. I mean, Jesus in the wilderness for 40 days, the Israelites for 40 years. And maybe it was exactly 40 days and 40 years. We don't know, but the scriptures seem to use 40 to symbolize a long time. Well, what if you have a long time, 40 times 3?
40, 40, 40 becomes superlatively a long time.
So 120.
Yeah.
So Noah may have been preaching for 120 years. He may have been preaching longer or less, just a really long time. But even notice that you get to 360 with this counting method, which is almost the number of days in the year. It's the number of degrees in a circle. So it actually is a very powerful way to actually order the world through numbers. Now, I have to say that the numbers in the Bible don't always cohere to this. You'll see some of this going on, that what we have in these stories are often symbols that are trying to convey these doctrinal principles, as Tyler's talking about, that God has these new beginnings. Or maybe you'll spend 40 days of your life, quote unquote, wandering in the wilderness, struggling with some difficulty before you enter into the promised land, 8 of a new beginning. And maybe you're like Moses, who gets to live 120 years, just like Noah preached for 120 years. And again, maybe Moses really lived 120 years, or maybe he had 3 long periods of life, one in Egypt, 40 years, 40 years out in the Medina, and then 40 years leading the Israelites into the promised land. So I share that perspective because sometimes when we read the Bible, which is like entering into a foreign country, the numbers can be a little overwhelming and confuse us. And our recommendation is try not to get too fixated on that, and let's try to stay focused on the principles that God is trying to invite us back into his presence, and to use the stories of past people, and we can learn from their choices. What were the consequences of those who were faithful? Those who weren't faithful, what were the consequences? And we can learn vicariously to choose well.